Oh, Brett, are you able to hear me? Hi everyone, welcome to our Null Safety event from being brought to you as the first event from Flutter Melbourne. My name is Maksim Lin. I'm one of the co-organisers of Flutter Melbourne, and I want to say welcome and thank you for coming along. Oh yes, cool. And yeah, like it's great to be doing another event. Today's event is going to be all about null safety. The agenda for today is this welcome, and afterwards I'll be handing over to Brett Morgan from the Google Flutter DevRel team, who will be giving us a bit of a live coding session all about how to migrate to null safety. After that, I'll be doing a little bit of a session about kind of some of the lessons I've learned about migrating some of the open source packages that I maintain to Null Safety, or like starting to migrate them. And then we'll have a bit of time for some questions. And with our Q&A session, please do think of a good question while Brent and I are speaking, because we'll have a gift voucher for the best question, and there'll also be a random draw for people who provide feedback for the session. So please do submit your feedback at the end of the session as well, and you'll go into the draw for a gift Uber Eats gift voucher for that as well. And a big thank you to Google for sponsoring the prizes for the best question and for the random draw tonight. Now, without further ado, I will bring Brett in. Welcome, Brett. Oh, sorry, I didn't unmute. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't unmute you quickly enough, but you did that even quicker than I did. Awesome. So welcome, Brett. Brett will be, I will stop sharing my screen, and Brett will be showing us some live coding, I believe, in how to do Null Safety, or migrate to Null Safety. Take it away, Brett. Welcome.
Thank you. I probably need a screen. How do I... Hey, Max, can you share my screen? Yay! I have a screen. Sweet. Okay. So let's talk about Null Safety in Flutter. And as previously mentioned, let's do it the way I know best, which is, of course, live coding. So let's see if I can get the right editor. No. Let's break out of that and drag in an editor. Come here. Okay, so let's talk about a problem. And this is a problem that we see all over the place. Let's say we're writing a class, and it's a data class. So we're going to have some information. I'm going to have a person. Well, actually, no, let's have a constructor for that class. Let's have a person that has a favorite color. Okay, so from the point of view of information modeling, the intent here is fairly obvious. This person has a favorite color, and the color is made up of red, green, and blue. Let's make it possible to actually print out what a person's color is and have a main function. So now we should just be able to run this code. So favorite color of instance of color. That's not that helpful. Let's pull in some stuff to actually give ourselves a way of encoding a color, and let's convert that into red, green, and blue. And we should be able to now, if I do all of the stuff, there we go, should be able to run this. So we can see that we now have a person with a favorite color. So for a lot of people, and myself for a long time, you sort of stop here and then you get null pointer exceptions everywhere. Why does this happen? Well, what happens if a person doesn't have a favorite color? Well, obviously you encode that as null. And then you try running the program and you get a lovely stack trace. Hex was called on null. So this is not right by a long shot. So let's try adding some code to actually make this safe. Oh yeah, and this is the other way of creating a person without a color. So okay, let's do the obvious thing and go, okay, if favorite is null, this person obviously has no favorite color. We run this and I'm a person with no favorite color. So is this complete? Are we done finishing? Have we done all our null protection? Well, let's think about this. What happens if I have a person that loves purple, for example? We have red and blue, but no green. What happens to our code if we run this? Sad face. The method ampersand was called on null. Okay, so our modeling for color is obviously less than perfect because we've got red and blue, but no green. So how do people currently get around like modeling things and enforcing that all the parts are actually there? Well, hey, let's turn around and say that red, green, and blue are required. That's cool. This is now it's a compile time warning. Not quite what we want, because we can still run this and it still fails, but we get these little squigglies. Parameter green is required. So let's give it green. We've made the squiggly go away, but we've actually passed it a null, which of course means that we still get an error stack. Okay. What do we actually have to do currently to enforce that all the members of color are actually there? Well, we then have to turn around and do assertions. And if you actually look in the Flutter code base, well, back in the day, before Null Safety, you would have seen a whole bunch of this all over the place where we were enforcing that required members were actually present and they were not null. And so with all this, when we turn around and run it, of course, we have to enable certs. Finally get an actual assertion that tells us what's going on. So finally, actual information, useful to a programmer. This doesn't actually seem, perfect. So let's boot that off, bring back the slides, and talk about what's going on. So the problem, when we model like a piece of data and say it's an integer, is this what we're actually saying? Well, of course, you want to be able to define things without having to give them a value up front, but this means it's actually null, which is equivalent to this, right? And why is this true? Well, how Dart and many other languages, but Dart pre-null safety is modeled is that you have a super type of, no matter what you define, whether it's a string, an int, a color, or whatever, you can pass it a null. And as we just saw, there are some times when you want to define an int that doesn't take a null. But of course, that's a problem because we've defined null as a subtype of int, which means that null is always something you can pass to an int, even though that's not what we want all the time. There are times when we do want it, but there are times when we don't. So obviously, we need to break this connection between, this subtype connection between int and null. So what we've done is we've introduced a parallel hierarchy of nullable types. So the nullable object, nullable int, of which null is a subtype of all, and then we have a parallel hierarchy of the non-nullable types, with object as a supertype and int. And how do these two type hierarchies mesh together? Well, object, the nullable object, is now the supertype of all things. Object is a subtype of nullable object. So in places where you want, like the Grand Poobah super object to say, I have no idea what this thing is, previously you would say it's an object coming in. Now you really want to say nullable object, because object itself is the supertype of everything except null, which is probably not what you're looking for when you're previously saying object. So this is cool. We now have this type system where we can turn around and say nullable int can be either an int or a null, which is cool. We can actually define what we want. But there's obviously a hole here. We've got this sort of gap in our sort of matrix of types. There's supposed to be something here, and what could it be? Well, what we on the Dart team have decided to call it is never. And I'll come back to that because it's actually a useful type. Sounds strange to say you can have a type that can't have anything in it, not even null, but it is useful. Okay, let's run through that again. Oops. But this time with null safety. So, same problem domain. Got a color. with 3 components, red, green, and blue. Obviously, this is erroneous because these are non-nullable ints, and I haven't given it anything. So it's going, oi, must be initialized. Give me a way of having a non-null value. So what do? We turn around and give it a constructor, but that's not sufficient. Previously, remember, we had this at required thing to say that something was required in this constructor. Well, in the new world, we have the same thing, but without the at. It's now actually part of the language. We can turn around and say, these 3 components are required to the constructor, red, green, and blue. And because the type of red, green, and blue is non-nullable, we're effectively saying when you construct a color, you must pass as the red, green, and blue components that are integers without nulls. So remember all that stuff we had before where we were asserting that things were passed in and making sure they were null, and this covers all of that. So we've gotten rid of a lot of code in being able to specify exactly what we're talking about. Okay, we have a person, and this time we're going to say, okay, a person's color is optional. It's nullable, color question mark. Because nulls aren't inherently bad. There are times when null is a useful thing to say. In this case, we're saying a person's color. They may or may not have a favorite. They may have, no desire to talk about color at all. And that's fine. We need to be able to model that. So null is a perfectly useful thing to have. Okay, so we turn around and say person with a favorite color of favorite. And we can turn around and do Dart run. And we get back to the point of going, well, instance of color is not the useful thing, so let's bring in our hex again, have an encoder, turn around and print that out. And this time, when we turn around and try and call hex, this hex getter on favorite, it's getting upset because it's a nullable value. It might be null. You don't get to call hex on something that might be null. So it's saying, try checking the value isn't null before dereferencing it. So one way of doing that is, well, what we're going to do here is turn around and check if favorite is null. And why? But there's an interesting problem here. So I've had to put the bang operator here, even though I've checked favorite is not null. And I'd like to demonstrate why this is important, because a lot of people seeing this for the first time are going, I shouldn't need to put this bang here because I've just checked favorite is not null. And I might as well let's first prove that this actually works. I'm a person with favorite color 00FF7F. So this code works. But why is this required? Let me show you. What we're going to do, we're pulling in Dart math because we need the usual friend of anyone who's trying to break systems, and that's random. What we're going to do is create a rainbow person, who's a subtype of person that has random colors. And every now and again, they don't actually have a color. So basically, what I'm saying here is get the next integer 0 to 5, and if it's not 3, return a random color. Otherwise, I'm going to return null, which is why this is a color question mark, which lines up with the type of favorite. So I've effectively constructed a random color that changes every time you ask this person. This person likes all the colors and no colors all at the same time, which means that if I run Dart run, actually, it would help if I go to the next step and replace myself with a rainbow person. This time, you'll see, cool, it only took 2 runs. So even though in my code here, I turn around and gone, if favorite doesn't equal null, print this out. Because this rainbow person's color changes every time you ask them, there are ways to get through this code that actually fails, which is why this is required. But however, if you take a copy of the favorite, then this bang operator suddenly goes away. So I can now run this and it will work, even though it will give me a warning saying you've got something that's not required. So let's get rid of that. Let's run the color again. No color, random different colors. You can see I can sit here and run it all day and it's not crashing. So the type system is actually helping me here, even when I write a subtype that tries to break the rules of the supertype. Okay, let's take it further. So I'm going back to a person with a normal color, get rid of that subtype, get rid of random. And what I'm going to do now is say, well, you must have a color because I'm just being obtuse. Now, this is great and all. And as you can see, the type system knows that if favorite is null, we're going to throw an exception. So by the time we get to here, we know that fav is not null. But what happens if we refactor this throw exception and pull it out into a method? And suddenly I need to put an exclamation mark here to make it compile, even though I know by inspection that if it's null, then an exception will be thrown. So what do we fail to do here in the type system is we fail to tell Dart that this method never returns. And I've probably just given away the trick here, which is you type it as never. And suddenly all the code works again and I can run it and it's fine. Even if I do turn around and get rid of all that and run it, and it will throw an exception. Exception must have a favorite color. Okay. Now, what I'm going to now, instead of previously we had color question mark, I'm going to turn around and introduce the late keyword. What we can do is we can say, and this is for modeling things where we know that this person should always have a color, it just won't be available at initialization of the person. So it'll turn up later, which means that I don't need this favorite color equals null or not null, because what we're effectively saying here to Dart is this person, by the time you actually call to string on it, will have a color. So we can turn around and do this, person with favorite color, and we should just be able to run it. And that works. Leading to the obvious question of, what was I getting rid of? Oh yeah, just getting rid of that. Don't need that anymore. What happens if you as a user turn around and construct a person and don't actually fulfill the contract of this late initialization? I never set the color on that person. Does Dart do the right thing and tell you that the world is broken? Well, yes, it does. Late initialization, field favorite has not been initialized. So this is cool. We have the ability to turn around and tell Dart we've got this thing that will be turning up later. Don't need to get all upset about it. In fact, we can go one better than that. We can have a thing called the late final. And this is kind of, this can be used for things like lazy initialization. I could turn around and put some initializer here that goes and talks to a database or whatever, and it will only get fired off when favorite is accessed. But this has a neat thing in that we can turn around and do this, and the code now works. But because I've said late final, if I try to change my mind and go, actually, I only believe in green now, we will again get this favorite has already been initialized. So there's a bunch of things that previously you had to write a whole bunch of fragile code to express, late initialization, one-off initialization, all those sorts of things that are now supported directly in the language thanks to this late keyword. It's a very useful introduction into the language. Okay, back to the slide deck. Make this small, bucket that off. Okay, so How am I going for time? 6:26. I still got some time. Woo! Let's do a quick run through of what I've just shown you. So we can have numbers, but this is a non-nullable int now. So we've separated nullable and non-nullable types. Turning around and just saying int green is also now an error. So you can either make it optional, or you can say it will turn up later. If you turn around and do late int green equals some function, it will turn out and become a lazy initializer. Late final, which I showed you. Bang, which is very useful for turning around and basically saying this thing that says via the type system that it's optional, that I actually know because of reasons that are unknown to the language that this actually has an object in it. So effectively, this is the null enforcement or non-null enforcement operator. We obviously have question mark for supplying an option, supplying a replacement value for something that's null. The question mark bang operator has gotten a whole bunch smarter than it used to be. So previously, every place that could possibly be null, you had to do question mark bang, whereas now it short circuits, which means that you don't need as many question mark dots as you used to. Required is new, and this is currently in beta. So I strongly suggest for those of you out there writing Flutter applications that you actually try it out and figure out whether your code works or not. And to that, let's have a quick bonus piece of content, which is let's port some code live on television and see what happens. So let's just escape this, move that off screen, bring down a third editor. So I just want to show you, this will take a little bit. I'm compiling an application. Come on, you can do it. So what we're going to build is a small language interpreter. It's a programming language called Monkey. I'll get into details about what it is in a little bit, but just to talk about it for a sec, you can have expressions. We can even have broken expressions, and we get some error handling. One of the really neat things with this programming language is that you can have closures. So what this is doing is f is a function that returns a function that returns a function that does this mass over the 3 arguments. And a hello world programming language would not be complete if we didn't turn around and do Fibonacci. Looks like I can't actually type straight. Let's see if that works. No, I can't debug my own code. Expect the next token to be egg. Let's if all else fails, copy code from somewhere else. Here's another version of Fibonacci. And of course, this language doesn't handle comments. So let's just rip the comments out. There we go, Fibonacci that actually works. Who says I can't code? Okay, so this is an application. As you can see, we've got a text area, we've got output, we've got a fab button. And if I actually go over here, we can see here's the actual language implementation. So what would be neat is to migrate it across. And so what we're going to do is run Dart migrate, and this is going to look at our code and analyze our project and have a look at all of our dependencies. And go, you've got a bunch of things that you depend on that haven't been migrated yet. Just a few things. But what we can do in the realms of testing things out is that we can go, yeah, we know there are things that haven't been ported yet, but we'll do it anyway. What we're going to do is analyze the project again, and at some point, come on, computer, you can do it. No issues found. Compiling. And now we have a link we can maybe possibly click on, or I can just cut and paste it. Okay, let's bring this in. Okay, so here's all the source code in the application. And if we go have a look in, say, AST, we can turn around and see that it's had to add a bunch of question marks and bangs, some late initializers. But if we look at the numbers, this evaluator is kind of where everything's at. It's got some casts, a whole bunch of interesting things. Now, the fun thing is we can click on things and wander around our code base. We can go take me to the monkey object, but we can look at this and go, this eval potentially returning a monkey object. I actually want it to always return a monkey object. So what I do is I click on this question mark and go add a bang hint, and that adds in a hint, and then I can rerun, and it's going to do something very interesting. It's going to reanalyze my code given that new constraint, and it's going to tell me, oi, you've got this null here, so I've got no valid way of migrating this code, which is hilarious because you can see up here, there is actually a null object which you could actually put in there, and we could do it, kind of running out of time. So what I will do instead, just to give you an idea, I'm going to remove that hint, rerun, and apply the migration. Now, this little hint here is interesting. What they're encouraging you to do effectively is to use something like Git, some source control system, to effectively have multiple different attempts at this, make modifications to your code to turn around and, do things like change where you're returning nulls, and explore using the ability to have Git branches or rollback changes and all that sort of thing. Because when you do things like add assertions like the bang comment, that actually turns up in your source code, and you can commit that to source control before you actually do this migration. But in the interest of running fast and loose, I'm just going to migrate. And if I zip that down, bugger that off screen, we can actually see down here, if we keep scrolling down, is it has migrated 19 files. So let's actually look at the damage that it's done. So first thing it's changed is the pub spec. So it set the minimum version of Dart as 2.12.0-0, And this is the minimum required to effectively turn on null safety. And then we go and have a look at, oh, this is one I should have changed. I'll just scoot that down. So you can actually turn around and go, actually, this is required. And that can go away. And so on and so forth. And you can even go, this one as well is probably not the best. So you can turn around and clean up your code, and the editing environment will help you. But the important thing is you can see once you start looking at your code base, where are all the parts where you need to actually think about it and go, should I actually be returning optional or nullable objects all over the place? Strange enough, in this code base, because it was originally written in Go, where nulls are quite widely used as, an empty string or an empty array, null objects actually make a bit more sense. But here, where you're in Dart, maybe you shouldn't be using them all over the place, which this code does. And sort of like at that point in time, you start having to think about, okay, how can I re-architect, refactor my code to be, a little bit more selective about where I use nulls, and so on and so forth. So, and one of the other things that's well worth having, I'll just quit this, is of course a good test framework. Sorry, Flutter test, wrong language. And one of the fun things that you will find, assuming you have a good test suite, is that you will find that you had bugs in your code that you didn't know about. Actually, that's one more bug than I was expecting. Oops. So let's go have a look at this one. So one of the fun things that's happening here is this function is expecting, as you can see, a list of monkey object, and it's actually getting a list of nullable monkey object. And this is probably not the best, but it's not the migration tool's fault, because function itself is effectively untyped. So this is a function that takes some arguments. It makes no claims as to what those arguments are. But what you can do to work around this is a thing called cast, where I can turn around and say it's actually monkey object. Hit save, on test again, and I'll have one less error. Curious where I picked up the other errors from. It worked this afternoon. I don't understand why it's breaking now. Whee! The Dart compiler exited unexpectedly. Oh yeah, okay. I'll fix those later. The joys of randomly coding while on a live stream. Okay, somewhere here I have the remnants of my slides. Okay. So if you're wondering where the language that I was just showing off came from, it's actually the programming language that Thorsten Ball created for his writing an interpreter and writing a compiler series. Great books, well worth reading. And I think after watching the Dart migrate tool make a mess of the Dart version, I'm probably going to wind up rewriting them, the Dart version of the interpreter, just for a fun thing to do. If you want more information, Dart dealt with Null Safety, and thank you. Back to
Brilliant.
you.
Thanks very much, Brett. That was excellent.
Thank you, Max.
So I can sympathise. There's always things that break only when you show other people. It's
Yep,
the bane of a programmer's life.
absolutely.
So I'm sure as soon as you come off the stream, they'll all just start working again. So but thank you very much for
one too many changes. So good.
That's right. We all do that. Brilliant. I might just switch over. Thanks very much for that. I'll bring you back shortly once we do our Q&A session at the end of the talk. And then I will start sharing my screen. And hopefully this will work. Yes. Okay, great. Cool. So, after Brett's excellent, live coding demo, I'm just going to talk about a bit more of a higher level, or like a bit more conceptual about what I've learned when I actually started to do some migration of packages to Null Safety. So currently, as Brett mentioned, Null Safety is in beta. So I believe the recommendation from the Google Flutter or Dart and Flutter team is that it's a good time for package maintainers or authors to migrate their packages, but the recommendation is that you should wait until all your dependencies preferably have migrated before you go ahead and do yours. Now, I was in the lucky position that, with one of my packages called Dolums, which is quite a small, simple little package that formats text into columns, it didn't really have any dependencies. So when I went along and ran the migration tool, just like Brett showed previously, I ran that command and I got a nice green tick. Yes, all ready to go. So that migration proceeded really quickly and easily, though, as Brett also said, what I did do was I took the opportunity to clean up some of the architecture and refactor some of the code, because some of the migrations that the tool suggested, for instance, like adding question marks and bangs, I actually knew, as the author of the code, that actually what I wanted was in some places for null to be not possible, for there always to be an argument required, or I always was going to guarantee that I'd return a non-null from a function. So some of the things I did when I migrated, even just a simple package, which I think is no more than a few hundred lines of code, was take the opportunity to do those kind of architectural changes and refactorings to make my code better just by being prompted by the migration tool. On the other hand, when I came to run the migration tool for my next package, which is DSG, which is like a static site generator, I got this instead. So this is potentially what you will get when you've got something which has quite a few dependencies, and especially a package like this, which is quite long in the tooth. I actually forked it and essentially inherited it from someone who'd written it a few years ago. And so quite a few of the packages, as you can see, not only didn't have null safe versions, but were actually quite old. So this is something that you may run across if you're currently a package owner and you try and go and migrate your package and you find this, or later down the track when null safety becomes stable and it's recommended for people to migrate their Flutter apps across. This also could be the case, because just because Dart and Flutter will have null safety as a stable feature won't mean that all the package authors and maintainers will have had a chance to actually migrate to null safety. So I thought it would be useful to maybe talk about what happens in this case. And really, I think you have several options. The first of which is to wait. So hopefully you just wait, and a little bit down the track, the authors or maintainers of the package will come up with a null safe version and you'll be good to go. So that's the ideal. The next, I guess, thing that you could do is ask nicely, which is actually possibly a good strategy as well, if they're planning to, or if they could see their way through to migrating their package to null safety, and then again wait a little bit, and hopefully they will do that migration at some point, and once again you'll have a dependency that's been migrated to Null Safety. The third option is potentially that you could take the opportunity to refactor your code around that dependency. So for instance, you might be able to refactor your code to no longer need that dependency in your code. And finally, the other option I think is DIY. So you can actually go ahead and might do the migration yourself because, hey, it's open source. No one's stopping you from forking that package and doing the migration for yourself, especially if it's perhaps the last one that you're waiting on and perhaps the maintainers of that package aren't going to be able to do that in as timely a manner as you may need. So as an example, one of the dependencies that I had in my DSG package is another package called where. And so the things I thought about when I saw that big red cross and it's saying that there is no null safe version of it is, how is it used in my code? What did it do? Is there any chance I could find an alternative package for it? And then what are the transitive dependencies of that package? When I say transitive, that means what are the dependencies of that dependency? So what things did the where package depend on itself in its list of dependencies? Now, Now, I wasn't planning to do much in the way of live coding, but I thought I'd just quickly show you, if I minimize that and bring back my VS Code, just need to pop it into the right window, is show you how you'd go about doing something like that. So with this where package, if I just come along here and comment it out, save that, I'll immediately see all the places where it's used because I've just pulled it out of my code. And in this case, turns out it's only used in one place. And it's only doing one thing really. And it's just looking at, if you look at the documentation for this package, what you'll find is that all it does is it actually looks up. Oh, let me just do that for you actually. Why don't I bring that back? And let's go. Let's go to pubdev, as this is actually something I did. Now, if you type in where, what I found was that's a really, really shocking keyword or name to use as a package, because you can see like it doesn't come up anywhere in the initial search results because it's not a widely used package. So actually what the ideal thing to do is to actually go and use the direct URL to get to it. Now, the next fantastic thing I discovered when I did this was this big discontinued button that the the package author had obviously put in there saying, sorry, I've decided I'm not really going to have much to do with this anymore, and it's probably not a good idea for people to keep using it. As you can see, this has probably happened about 6 or more months ago, so there's very little chance that this package is going to get migrated to Null Safety, at least by its package owner or maintainer. So really the options here are, like I said in that list, is I refactor my code to not depend on it anymore, or I do it myself. Luckily, what this package actually does is very much like that joke about the left padding in NPM. All it does is it provides a which-like command, or a which-like functionality for Dart, and for those of you who don't use Unix or Linux, which just tells you like the path to a particular executable on your system. So if you need to find out, say, in this particular case where the SAS compiler binary lives, this would tell you. But this is such a simple piece of functionality, I can just essentially just call out to which and get the same bit of functionality that this package provides, or I can just remove it and not even worry about it, and perhaps give people an option to provide that path. So in this particular case, that refactoring is probably the best option. Just stop depending on it and keep calm and carry on. Now, if I switch back to my code here, let's just undo that change. Another package that is on the red cross list is this HTTP server package. So if we do the same, I just want to show you what would happen if I do the same thing to it, commented it out. And again, like VS Code has a little think about it. And again, oh, it looks pretty good. Like it looks like there's only a few places it's being used, like a couple of places. Wow, maybe we could do the same thing here and just refactor our code to get rid of it, just like the other one. But if we actually go back to pubdev and search for HTTP server, which as you can see, I've already done before. I've primed this as best I could for my demo. If we come back here, what turns out is this is a set of utility classes for the HTTP server. And in fact, look at this. It's actually run, the package is done by our friends at Google. So that gives me and there's no discontinued button. So this gives me a much better feeling about it being updated to migrated to Null Safety soon. But if I have a look about my original intention to basically factor it out, what it turns out the virtual directory does, I have to put it back so we can get its documentation. Virtual directory actually serves files and directories from a root path and provides a secure handling of requests and URIs and file system links, correct MIME types. Okay, so it's not just like a little one command job. This actually, even though it looks like it's only used in one place, this is actually a fair bit of functionality all wrapped up in that package. So refactoring out is probably not going to be my ideal choice. But like I said, it looks promising that it's maintained by people like, even Kevin has uploaded to it. So the Dart product manager. So looks like there's a potential that this might be updated soon to Null Safety. And if I go to its homepage, I had a quick look-see to see if there were any branches that, for instance, they may have started work on. No, unfortunately, that wasn't the case. So if you remember that second option I said, which was ask nicely and wait, well, that's basically what I did. I've asked nicely, but I kind of combined this with the DIY factor and said that perhaps I could contribute the migration of this package. And to be honest, the only reason I did do that was when I did look at it on pubdev, what I noticed was pubdev is very handy in that it tells you the dependencies of any package as well as the packages that depend on it. And in this case, it says the only two dependencies of HTTP server are in fact MIME and path. And I have a pretty strong feeling that they've already been migrated. So in fact, this may not be such a big job if I was to do the DIY route and do the migration myself and hopefully contribute it back to the nice package maintainers of this package. And if we also look at the packages that depend on HTTP server, this might be something that other people will be grateful for, because if we have a look through here, there's 3 pages of dependencies on this package. Sorry, that's quite a mouthful, but essentially there would be quite a few other packages that are being blocked from doing their own migration to Null Safety by this not having been migrated. So hopefully I can do a bit of a community service and do this migration, contribute it, and that's actually what I've started working on, is to do the migration and contribute it and hopefully help out the package authors who are obviously probably planning to do the migration, but quite possibly have a lot of other things on their hands at the same time, being part or members of the Google team. And I can see off screen Brett nodding along with me somewhat, which I think he can sympathize. So I just wanted to take that opportunity to show you basically 2 variations on the theme of having packages that I need in order to finish migrating mine to Null Safety, and how different they can be in terms of what's required to get them basically unblocking my package and getting it migrated to Null Safety. So to cut a long story short, my second package has not migrated to Null Safety yet, but I've got basically a to-do list now of all those red crosses, and for the most part, I can either, having gone through them all, I've got basically a plan of either refactoring my code to not rely on ones which are very straightforward, wait on a couple that I know are coming down the pipeline in terms of their null safety migrations that are being done by their package maintainers, and probably I'm expecting that the HTTP server package and possibly one other package I may have to do for myself and try and contribute that null safe migration to help myself and other people in the community to be unblocked. So basically, to wind up, the lessons I've learned is, so this is one small point that I didn't talk about previously was before you do jump ahead with starting your migration, even if you are not blocked with any dependencies, is do think about if you've got any pending changes that you want to make before you do your migration, because currently, again, null safety is in beta. So essentially what that means is at the moment, anyone who does the migration is maintaining a null safe branch, where they've migrated their code, as well as their existing stable branch, which in pub, you're actually able to publish both the stable version and the dev null safe version. So if you've got any pending changes that you want to make, probably a good idea is to make them before you do your migration, rather than having to port them backwards and forwards between your two different branches that you'll have, and you'll have to keep that null safe branch going until null safety goes into stable. And then I believe, I'll ask Brett this in a second when he comes back, is I believe at that point then we will be able to on pub publish our packages only with null safety and only have a null safe version. Also, like Brett said and I've mentioned previously, don't just rely on the auto migration. Look for opportunities to simplify and improve your code based on the migration to null safety. While Brett said that the bang operator is important in some cases, my kind of rule of thumb is to avoid it where I can, because I found that in a lot of places my code, by improving the code or making it a bit better, I'm able to remove the need for the bang operator. So my kind of rule of thumb is to try and think long and hard if you really need the bang operator every time it appears. I found that in most places you don't need it. Not everywhere, but in a lot of places. And finally, when in doubt, read the docs. Like the Google, Flutter, and Dart teams have done a great job writing up some excellent documentation on how to do the migration to null safety. So please jump on their websites and check out those docs, because they've had quite a bit of thought put into them and they really are very useful. So with that, I'll say thank you. I will bring Brett back in and hopefully ask for questions. So this is your chance. Like if anyone has a question, please ask it. Otherwise, I have a couple of questions I've got that I'd like to ask Brett, but I'll give people a second because we've got a bit of a delay for things coming in from YouTube. Well, actually, first of all, I will, while we are waiting, I will ask you, Brett, is that true that once null safety is stable, that all packages will just simply flip over and only have a null safe version on PubDev?
It's very much up to the package author, because effectively for null safety, you're effectively setting the minimum version that a package supports is 2.12, which means that package authors at their option can effectively do this current world where they have, say version 1 and version 2, where version 1 is the pre-null safe version and continue supporting that, and then the V2, which is null safe and will be used by anyone who's running on a version of Dart that can support mixed mode. So you can actually use packages that are ported to null safe even though you haven't yet gone to null safe, and you'll actually see this when you actually go and look in your package lock file. You'll actually see there's a bunch of null safe stuff in there already. But yeah, it's very much up to individual authors.
Oh, cool. So I didn't realize that. So it is possible that even once null safety is stable, there will be some packages who'll still have they have the option to have the non-null safe versions if they want.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Oh, there we go. I've learned something already. Fantastic. And there is a few questions that have already popped up. I'm not sure if you can see them. But the first one I might read out is, from Martin. It seems to be a bit similar to Kotlin null safety. So what about the Elvis operator?
If
Do you want to
only
take
I
that
knew
one,
what
Brett?
the Elvis operator is.
Okay. So the Elvis operator is like a question. This is a common thing in Kotlin. Is it's a question mark with a colon. So hence, it looks a little bit like Elvis. Like if you look at it kind of sideways.
Yep.
So and I'm trying to remember Kotlin because I haven't done it for a little while now. The Elvis operator in Kotlin is like so if kind of if it's null, this like so sort of like I believe like if you think of kind of like the question mark operator, I guess.
I'm trying to
Somewhat.
understand. I'm having a quick look at some documentation, and I'm trying to understand what the difference between Kotlin's Elvis operator and our question mark. Because
Well,
in what I've
to
seen
me, to
so
me,
far,
yeah, to me they seem very similar. I'm not sure if there's any subtle differences in the semantics, but I think they are pretty. Well, I think the thing is that Kotlin never had the question mark concept. So even like because it made sense in Dart even before null safety, but I think to me they seem very similar semantically. It's like if something is null, have this default value.
yeah.
So hopefully that's answered the question. But yeah, like there might be. I'll actually take that on notice, and I'll see if I can research to find out if there's any more subtle differences that I'm not thinking off the top of my head.
Okay.
The next question was from. Sorry, next question was from Craig. He says, you sort of touched on this already, but do you think it's practical at the moment that all dependencies be migrated before shipping an app? The reason I ask is that I've got an app that has only 9 dependencies, none of which are migrated yet. And this results in 104 non-null safe transitive dependencies. Yikes. Yes. That's a lot of transitive dependencies that are not migrated. So do you think it's worthwhile migrating when you've got like lots of dependencies that haven't migrated?
So the fun thing here is the suggestion not to migrate until all of your dependencies have migrated comes down to the fact that you can migrate, which I just demonstrated. I migrated without all my dependencies migrated. And it gives you the ability to write code that has all this wonderful properties where you turn around and say this is null or this is not null. The problem is if your dependencies are not ported, they can still give you nulls. So effectively, you're operating in a mode that's called mixed mode, which is effectively what everyone's operating in right now. They have a mixture of null safe and non-null safe code, and the Dart runtime will insert null checks where required at the boundary of the null safe packages and the non-null safe packages. And you'll wind up with exceptions being thrown where if you look at your code, it makes no sense. You're just, this thing shouldn't be null, and yet it is, because the thing I'm calling it from hasn't declared that it's not null safe.
Yes.
So is it possible to port? Absolutely. We don't suggest it, but depending on a bunch of factors, you may be willing to turn around and do a migration, and then every time that your non-null safe dependencies go across, you may have to make some changes in your code because things weren't quite the shape that you thought they were going to be. So you wind up with a bit more maintenance headache, but it's probably quite possibly worth it.
Yep. And if I was to be very snarky as a former, well, not former, but like having done Android development for quite some time, that's basically the world that Android Kotlin developers have lived in for a long, long time. Interoperating with Java, which had no concept of null safety, meant that in lots of different places you could just get runtime null errors, even though you're going, oh, but Kotlin was supposed to protect me from all these null errors, null pointer exceptions. But of course, you just get Kotlin's own runtime exception where exactly like what you demonstrated in your live coding, you told it there was going to be a non-null in a certain spot. But it turned out it was null after all, because some helpful Java code that you called returned a null, even though you didn't expect it. So yeah, like I guess it's a trade-off, but it's a kind of, it potentially is useful for some people as a stepping stone to full sound null safety once everything's once all their dependencies move across. Finally,
the sort of light on the hill here for us is that once you have an application where all of the things that you depend on have been ported across to null safety, the code that the Dart ahead of time compiler generates will be much smaller, because it will be able to strip all the null checks. This is going to be a wonderful world. It will wind up with faster applications. We just have some work to get from here to there, and that will just take time.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me. I'll post a link in our Slack channel. Like, there was just, I think yesterday, an excellent article exactly about that. AOT code generation and null safety from, I think, the lead of the Dart, the technical lead for the Dart or something.
BJ. Yep.
That's it. Yeah. So yeah, I'll post a link to that, because that was a great article explaining how much more efficient the code can be once sound null safety is in your apps, and the compiler can depend on that. Jumping onto Mike's question, I think I might handball this one to you. Expecting unstable in Q1 2021, which seems to match the Flutter event on the 3rd of the 3rd. Can we expect it unstable after that? But Mike also... But Michael, maybe we'll just skip across the next one. Does Dart have to go NNBD at the same time Flutter goes NNBD?
So answering these questions in reverse order, Dart and Flutter now have matching release trains. So there was a period where Dart and Flutter had separated release schedules, but now when Flutter does a release, it gets a matching version of Dart, which means that everything will go NNBD. And the hint there is that, as you saw in my code, the minimum version required is 2.12, which is the one that's on dev right now. And if you can line up your numbers, you can probably guess where that's going to land with the way that we do our Flutter releases through dev, beta, stable. I'm hoping that answers your question, Mike.
Yeah, so we've got a little bit of delay before, for instance, Mike can reply. But he did reply. I know the Brett can't answer, like Brett can't, and I don't know. So it's like, so we're much of a pair together. But it is. I think, like, at least from my point of view, I have found the synchronization of the Dart and Flutter releases to make my life a bit more sane, and I think this probably goes for a lot of people working on Flutter apps, that it makes things a lot more simpler now that the Dart and Flutter releases are kind of matched up together. So, yep. And speaking for myself, I've actually found, like, I've been working on a lot of, like, not Flutter, but Dart, like command line packages, or Dart, like pure Dart packages, not necessarily Flutter plugins. So the fact that they're synchronized means that I've got less headaches in terms of trying to keep the two worlds, as it were, in sync. So, yep, Mike says, yep, thanks. And, so does Craig. So, yeah, thanks, everyone, for the great questions. I've just looked at the clock and realized we're probably heading a little bit over time. So thank you, everyone, for your great questions, and thank you for coming along today. I'll leave up the URL for just a little bit longer for feedback. So if everyone who came along could please fill out the feedback form, it really helps us to know how you found the event and plan for future events. We're still doing online events at the moment because of the whole COVID situation, but hopefully in the not too distant future we'll also be able to start back on our in-person events. But for the time being, please give us your feedback, and we'll try and plan for more online events later on in the year, or even not so later on in the year. We'll try and get back into 2021 with a bang. So Yeah, I'd like to say thanks again to Brett. It was great to have you on today, and it was really interesting watching the demo. In fact, I learned a couple of things watching it carefully, so I've been jotting down notes. So that was very cool, like especially about the late finalize. I hadn't realized that it actually works really nicely with the late final together, apart from the null safety actually works really. I've already got ideas on how I want to use that in my code, just using that as a lazy initializer. So that was very cool. And yeah, thanks very much everyone for coming along. Please submit your feedback. Brett and I will have a chat maybe later on, and we'll choose the best question and hand out that prize. And I'll be in touch. I think I know all the people in the who've asked questions are in our GDG Slack, so I'll contact the winners directly via our GDG Slack. If you're not in the Slack, please do join. Just search for GDG Melbourne or GDG ANZ and join our Slack. And yeah, thank you very much for coming along, and please look out for our next event. See you.